Because of the taboo nature, it kind of creates shame around it.
I don't know, how do I put this? It's not something that I've ever discussed.
I have that reaction definitely because I'm not a doctor. We can pretend it doesn't exist, but it does exist. We live in quite a dangerous world. I'm just going to pause there because I really want people to just reflect on that for a minute.
Assalamu alaikum, viewers and listeners. Welcome back to another episode of Side by Side. I'm your host, Kazi Shafiqur Rahman, and our guest today is Sister Amirah Zaky, who is a intimacy therapy expert.
Because we live in a hypersexualized society, people have certain mindsets or beliefs about the topic of intimacy. Islam teaches us that sexual intimacy within a marriage is a form of worship. I am very fond of good, healthy, good quality marriages within the Muslim community, and I want that to grow. This education might not be needed if we weren't being bombarded by what we see on social media, and it's almost impossible to avoid it. Could this potentially be Shaitan trying to destroy my marriage?
This episode is brought to you by Buddy's London, the fried chicken legends of East London. Remember those classic PFC spots most of us grew up eating in? Well, Buddy's has brought back that old school East London fried chicken flavour with a modern twist, infused with secret Bangladeshi spices passed down through generations. Buddy's is a clean, family-friendly restaurant that uses technology to enhance the guest experience. Whether you're using their click and collect option or the deliver to your car concept via their app, Buddy's has you covered. Check them out at buddieslondon.com.
Assalamu alaikum, Sister Amirah. Welcome to Side by Side podcast.
Walaikum assalam. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for making the effort and I guess coming to the studio. Now let's begin. This is a topic. I don't know, how do I put this? Just bearing in mind our audience, it's not something that I've ever discussed. And growing up, even as a person, and I think you will understand this as well, it's a subject that you don't really speak about. But I'm going to open the floor for you to just educate our audience in terms of what you do, and I guess more importantly, why you do it.
Mm-hmm. So I educate people, especially within the Muslim community, about intimacy, whether they are single or married. Of course, within Islam, we know that sexual intimacy is something within marriage, but we shouldn't wait until we're married to try and find out about it. We need to educate ourselves before. So that's why I say, whether someone is a man or a woman, single or married, I believe in the importance of education about intimacy in the broad sense of intimacy, because intimacy isn't just physical intimacy. There's so much more to it. And it is something that a lot of Muslim families do shy away from. They kind of see it as a topic that's meant to be taboo, or it's something you'll learn about when you get married. But what I've noticed is that the taboo nature of not talking about these topics is unfortunately causing issues in a lot of Muslims, whether they're single or married. We live in a society now where it's kind of everywhere you look, it's kind of what you see around you. And that, especially within the West, but not only in the West, that can be difficult to manage. So I try to provide education to even single Muslims on how to manage those things when it comes to desires, etc. And then when you look at marriages, because of the taboo nature, it kind of creates a shyness around it, or a kind of level of shame around it, which can cause problems within a marriage. Even though it's now halal for that couple to engage in intimacy, they might struggle, or they might have a lack of education about it, not knowing if this is the right thing. And so they might have questions about it. And so I do this work because I had struggles myself when I got married, because of the taboo nature, because of the lack of education. So I really care about preventing further issues within the Muslim community, which is why I try to educate about it.
No, thank you. That's a very, I guess, it sets the frame and the context for our viewers to, I guess, understand what we're going to be talking about in this episode. No, so the work you do, I mean, if a doctor is talking about such topics, it's I guess not taboo. It's okay. But when it's someone who's probably not a doctor, like, you know, how you go to a GP and you meet a doctor, not those ones, then it becomes somehow a taboo. Like, do you find that's the reaction that you get from people?
Yeah, I have that reaction definitely because I'm not a doctor. I also feel like I get that reaction a little bit more probably because I'm a woman and because I'm a visibly Muslim woman. So I tend to get that reaction quite a lot from the Muslim community, that kind of like along the lines of, who is she to be talking about these topics? I should have a bit more haya and a bit more modesty, have a bit more shyness and not talk so openly. If I am going to talk about it, it needs to be in private. But as mentioned previously, like there needs to be a balance. Islam is about balance. If we keep things so private that people don't know where to get the education from, it can lead to certain extremes where people are accessing really damaging information or damaging videos. I'm sure you kind of know what I'm alluding to. Damaging sources of this type of education. When I say damaging, I mean spiritually, mentally damaging. You know what I'm talking about? Certain videos that you can access very easily.
Yeah.
People are leaning towards that because they don't know where else to find the information or the education. I want to provide Islam-aligned education. And one of the easiest things I can say is, at the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, women and men were able to easily approach him and ask him questions about very intimate topics that if we ask them now, we might get people very shocked. Like, how can you mention that word? Or how can you speak to a man about that topic? But I said women and men spoke to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ about those intimate topics, because when it comes to learning about things related to the deen, and our deen is very broad, it's not just, do this and don't do that. There's so much to our deen. When it comes to educating ourselves about intimacy, which is a part of our deen, there is no haya or shyness around that, because if we don't educate ourselves about it, we might accidentally do something that is out of alignment with Islam.
So, schools in this country, obviously they are pushing for, I guess, and I can say sex education. And many people are obviously in opposition of that, to teach children at such a young age about subject matters they probably don't even need to know about. And my father always used to say, well, you don't need to teach animals such education, then why do you need to teach humans, such education? Maybe he didn't experience or face any difficulties in that subject. What are your thoughts, where schools are taking a step to educate young children on a subject matter that is probably irrelevant at that age?
Yeah.
Well, in my perspective, it is irrelevant.
Yeah. So I believe in certain aspects of sex education that are necessary for kids and teenagers to know. And I'll state why. Sex education isn't just about the act, the physical act. That is one small part of sex education. Sex education, good sex education, is actually more relationship education and is really meant to be something that is preventative and protective. So those elements are important for kids and teenagers to know, because we do live in a world, like we can pretend it doesn't exist, but it does exist. We live in quite a dangerous world where grooming exists, like child grooming exists. Just dangerous things can happen online and in the real world. So it is important in an age-appropriate way to educate kids about those dangers to protect them, because it can even happen within schools. So that is one aspect of sex education. Another important aspect is friendships, families, relationships. And relationships doesn't just mean romantic relationship, it's very broad. Teaching children and teenagers how to have healthy relationships with their peers and with adults in their lives is very important, because that provides a foundation for them later on in life to have a good romantic relationship, such as in the context of a marriage. But I think sex education in this country, especially in state schools, is very secular. And there are going to be elements of that sex education that are not in alignment with what we believe as Muslims. And that's where the challenges can exist. And so part of my work also provides education to parents on how to have conversations with their children, where if they are learning something at school that is not in alignment with Islam, how do you remind them of, this is what we believe in Islam and this is what others believe, and how do you help your children to navigate those differences in the culture that we're living in? So in essence, sex education is important. It's fine if a parent decides that he or she wants to opt their child out of that sex education, that's fine. But the parent needs to be able to fill the gap themselves and provide that education from home. And what I'm noticing is a lot of parents don't know. They don't know how to have that conversation. And it's not just one conversation, it's conversations as the child grows older and older.
So why is it that then in I guess in past times we didn't need to talk about certain things? Why is it now we have to talk about it? I mean, can't humans, I mean, can they not just, I guess, make sense of it themselves? Do we have to teach everything?
So you mentioned about like animals can just know what they're doing and get on with it. I believe humans are different to animals. And I believe that actually when it comes to Islam, what does Islam say about the topic of intimacy, especially sexual intimacy within a marriage? Islam teaches us that sexual intimacy within a marriage is a form of worship. I'm just going to pause there because I really want people to just reflect on that for a minute. Like, as Muslims, we are taught all our lives how important it is for us to learn about different types of worship, whether it's reading Quran, prayer, fasting, giving to charity, Hajj, all the different, forms of worship, which are extremely important. But when you reflect on what I just said, and this comes from our deen, sexual intimacy within marriage is a form of worship, which means we get rewarded by Allah. Why are we not educating ourselves about that topic? Now, of course, people can just learn about it when they are married. That does happen. And in a lot of situations, that can be fine. But what I'm noticing is because we live in a hypersexualized society and it's almost impossible to avoid it, people have certain mindsets or beliefs about the topic of intimacy that they are then bringing into a marriage. So before they get married, they might see things on social media, in magazines, in movies. They might hear about things from their friends. They have all those pre-existing beliefs, and then they bring that into a marriage. And then when they try to engage in the intimate act and it's not what they thought it was going to be, or it's not what they expected, they then kind of may start to criticize themselves or think bad about themselves or think bad about their spouse. And so that's what I mean by it causes issues within the marriage. And a lot of those issues could be prevented with the right faith-aligned sex education.
Interesting. Very interesting. You somehow managed to, turn my perspective around, because I've always thought, certain things you just like, you should just know because you're a human being. So you specialize in a subject matter, and I can't even pronounce that word. If you can pronounce it for me and I can repeat after you, what is it that you specialize in, and why is it so important?
I specialize in helping women with a condition called vaginismus.
Vaginismus.
Yeah.
Okay, vaginismus.
Mm-hmm.
So what is it? And I guess for me, it's a very new word. I mean, I've never discovered that word until now.
Yeah.
So
it was new for me too, once upon a time. Before I got married, I had never heard of the word vaginismus before. And when I was newly married in the first year or two, I still had no idea what vaginismus was. The way I came to learn about it was because of my struggle in the early years of my marriage. And it was that struggle that I eventually overcame, alhamdulillah. But it was that struggle that led me to have the purpose behind why I do this work. So as mentioned, some of the lack of education with regards to intimacy before marriage is what caused a problem for me personally. And so I had then had to educate myself within the marriage to overcome vaginismus. So vaginismus is a condition that affects women where when they are trying to be intimate with their spouse, they find it really difficult, uncomfortable, and painful. That the act of intimacy, there are different forms of intimacy, but when I say intimacy in a marriage, people usually think of one type. So that specific type that most people think about is very difficult for the woman because she finds it really uncomfortable, not just a little bit uncomfortable. She finds it so uncomfortable that it's actually painful. And because it's painful, that specific act is not possible. And so she and the husband may just say, okay, it was our first time. We'll put it down to nerves. Let's try again. And when they try again, maybe the next day or the next week, they notice the same thing happens. And it becomes a cycle where that specific type of intimacy is so difficult and painful and challenging for them. Usually, if they've ruled out other medical symptoms, usually it's because of vaginismus, which is where a woman's pelvic floor muscles, men have pelvic floor muscles too, but with vaginismus, the pelvic floor muscles in a woman are contracting and causes everything down there to become very narrow and very tight. And that is why there's a lot of pain and discomfort with that specific act. It's something I went through in my own marriage. Like I said, I didn't know it was called vaginismus until I educated myself. And I believe in Islam, a lot of education is part of our deen. Like we can't know about our deen without education. And so education, in my opinion, is like nur, seeking light. Allah instructs us to educate ourselves. It's like 100% a huge foundation of our deen. And so through my own education about why is it so difficult and painful for me, through understanding why and learning that, I didn't even know what pelvic floor muscles were before. Again, that was part of the education I found out about them. I then had to learn how to get those muscles to relax. And then by learning how to relax those muscles, the act of intimacy, the specific act of intimacy that I'm referring to, became easier and became comfortable and became pain-free. This was a journey. It didn't happen overnight. It was a journey. And I was only able to overcome it through the education. So for anyone who's thinking that, like, I'll just talk about it in private, unfortunately, because Muslims, men and women, are growing up in families where they were taught, it's something we just don't talk about, you'll find out about it when you get married. They feel they have a level of shame to talk about these topics. Sometimes they even feel ashamed to bring it up to their own family or ashamed to bring it up to a doctor. So a lot of Muslims, men and women, struggle in silence. And then it can be destructive in a marriage where people can go through that condition for years and not know what's wrong. And so we have social media now. I'm on social media educating about these topics because I really hope that if anyone, woman or man, is struggling with that condition in their marriage, they see a Muslim woman talking about it and it kind of removes some of that shame and it kind of helps them to not have low self-esteem about themselves, because a lot of the time women will criticize themselves of, why can't I do this? It's meant to be something so simple and easy. But then it helps them to go on that journey to educate themselves and then overcome that struggle.
If you were to address the brothers, maybe who are looking to get married or who are about to get married,
Yeah.
because obviously before you got married, you didn't know like such a thing existed, nor did your husband.
Mhm.
And I did watch a few of your podcasts and where you described the story how your husband was patient with you for over a year until you have managed to overcome it. If you were to speak to the brothers, what would you say to them in terms of like, how to approach this subject?
I would say be compassionate, because in the Quran, Allah tells us that the main purpose of marriage is compassion, tranquility, like rahma, sakina, mawadda, which are like love, mercy, compassion. That is the foundation of marriage in Islam. And so if your wife is struggling with regards to intimacy, it is so important to not blame her and to not shame her. It is so important that you think, what would the Prophet ﷺ do in this situation if his wife was struggling with anything? We know from the numerous examples, the Prophet ﷺ would have been compassionate, patient, understanding, loving. So it's so important for men to be that way too in their marriages. As mentioned, Allah tells us in the Quran, I'm not even quoting hadith, in the Quran, the purpose of marriage is rahma, mawadda, sakina, love, mercy, compassion. So that you need to apply that in this situation, because blaming and shaming is not going to help her to overcome it any quicker. In fact, it might hinder her ability to overcome it. Being there for her as a team, being patient, understanding, asking her, how can I help you? How can I support you? How can we educate ourselves to overcome this? How can we seek treatment for this? Whether it's through a doctor or through a different professional, be there and help her and support her and be patient. That's so important.
Why does vaginismus happen in the first place? Like, what are the causes?
So the main cause is a lack of education. And again, that it comes back to my why I do this work. For me personally, it was because I didn't know about my body, didn't know about pelvic floor muscles. I didn't know that having a fear of first-time intimacy is one of the main causes of vaginismus. So just to kind of break it down, if anyone has a fear that something is going to happen, such as if I said, like, I'm going to hit you with something and you had a fear of pain, automatically, probably without you realizing, your body just tenses up, your muscles tense up. So a lot of girls and women, when they're growing up, they hear stories about first-time intimacy, and they tend to hear that for men it's really nice and feels great, but for women it's really painful. Or for women there might be blood. They hear stories. Now, I'm not saying those stories are made up. For a lot of women who do experience first-time intimacy, naturally, whenever a human does something for the first time where they don't know what they're doing, or, they have first-time nerves, that's natural. Those first-time nerves is causing a bit of stress and anxiety and fear within the body. And again, as mentioned, when you have stress, anxiety, or fear within your body, your muscles tense up and contract. Women have pelvic floor muscles. As I mentioned, men have them too. But in women, the pelvic floor muscles surround that specific area that I'm referring to, which is why if the pelvic floor muscles tense up and contract, makes everything tighter and really narrow and really difficult for any intimate act to happen. So vaginismus occurs because of a lack of education of actually first-time intimacy for a woman is not meant to be painful. But a lot of women experience it being painful because they are afraid of it being painful. So it's kind of like their belief caused it to happen. Their belief caused the pain to happen because their belief being it's going to hurt me, caused their muscles to tighten, and therefore it was painful. But if they learnt prior to marriage about their pelvic floor muscles, again, this is why I stress how important education is. If they learn about, first of all, they have these muscles called pelvic floor muscles, and they learned that it's important to know how to relax those muscles when you're trying to be intimate for the first time, then they would feel empowered with that knowledge and realize that, okay, if I learn how to relax the muscles when I'm trying to be intimate for the first time, it's going to be a lot more comfortable for me. And also realize that physical intimacy in a marriage is something that is not something you just know or don't know. It's not something you're either good at or you're not good at. It's something that is a new skill that you're learning with your new spouse. So it's fine if it doesn't happen the first time. It's fine if it's uncomfortable the first time. Don't push through the discomfort because sometimes that can make it worse. It's realize that your first time is your first time ever really doing that type of act. Like prior to marriage, we know that we're meant to avoid it. So we can't expect to know what we're doing first time if we've never tried it before. So once you're married, know that inshallah you have the rest of your lives together to get more comfortable with each other's bodies and to get more comfortable with that intimate act until it becomes more comfortable. For some couples, they get it straight away and it's fine and easy straight away, and that's great. But for other couples, they struggle. And it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the couple that struggle. It just means they need some time to figure it out until it becomes more comfortable.
I suppose it's almost similar to fear of flying. I mean, we all have fear of flying to a certain extent, but I guess because we know, okay, the pilots are well trained, the aircraft are very well maintained, it's okay. Inshallah, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
We look at the stats, it's okay, it's safe to fly. But there are other people, and I've seen documentaries where they're attempting to fly and then towards the end they just say, no, I'm not going to get on that plane.
Yeah.
And I guess for me, if I was to, compare the two, it's almost similar because it's lack of information. If those people understood what goes on behind an aircraft operation or what it takes to fly a plane, they would probably be very comfortable because it's way safer than, being in a car.
Absolutely. I like that you use that analogy. An analogy that I sometimes like to use when it comes to physical intimacy in a marriage is the fact that it's a skill, a physical skill. It's got mental and emotional components to it too. But if you think about that one specific act that I was talking about with regards to physical intimacy in marriage, that specifically is a brand new physical skill that a man and woman are trying to learn and figure out. And so if you think about other physical skills that require knowledge and training, such as learning how to swim, learning how to ride a bike, sometimes a person might be afraid to learn how to swim the first time or afraid to get on that bike. But through practice, they eventually will learn it. And some people might be able to swim immediately once they get in the water. But for most people, they require some education, some training to learn how to swim. So the same applies within a marriage. Education before marriage is important, but also continuing that education within marriage is also important.
It's interesting. I mean, You're right. You know, how can you expect someone to know everything about a subject matter that they've never kind of gotten involved in, and then they're supposed to be expert from day one? It sounds very simple. It sounds very simplistic, but in reality, I suppose it takes years to craft a skill of any sort. It does take years. Like if you start going to gym, you know, you can't expect to lift like 70 kgs from day one. It takes a lot of time and, you know, practice and I suppose patience as well.
Yeah.
Now, I saw one of your videos where you were talking about the act. A lot of people go to the act straight away without, you know, anything before, and you referred that to where Prophet or Allah said somewhere, you know, it's not allowed or it shouldn't be done in such a manner. There has to be a process. Like, is that really such a thing? Because in a lot of, from what I understand, South Asian communities, it's not really like, you know, the act is just an act and you just do it and get over and done with and move on.
So I'm going to bring up a really strange analogy now that just popped into my head. It's like, imagine like you're eating a burger and you don't chew the burger, you just try and swallow it. I think that's going to be quite painful and uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
So when it comes to women especially, women were created differently to men. A man might be able to just up and go and just do the full act without much prior anything. And actually, having said that, a lot of men, good men, they usually like the prior stuff. They like doing the stuff beforehand because it helps them get more in the mood for it and helps them enjoy it more. A lot of good men enjoy seeing their wife enjoy it too. So even if they can just up and go and just get it over and done with, most men want to take time to see their wife really enjoying it. Now, I mentioned that Allah created women differently. Women require, what I was mentioning in the hadith is the Prophet ﷺ said to the men companions at the time, do not approach your wife like animals. Approach them with sweet romantic words and kisses prior to that intimate act. Okay. So don't just go straight in for it. There should be, I think he said, approach them with a messenger. And the companions asked, what is that messenger that you're referring to? The Prophet ﷺ replied, sweet romantic words and kisses. And that comes under a topic known as foreplay, which is prior to the act. And as mentioned, it's something that men and women can enjoy, and it makes that act that you're aiming for way more enjoyable and pleasurable for both, for the man and the woman. So it's part of Islam as well.
Wow, it's funny how you make everything, somehow you link it back to Islam. It's interesting. I mean, whatever you are saying, it does make sense, because ultimately, if we are marrying and if marriage is half of our deen and faith, then I suppose it's not something that you just take very lightly, and there are a lot of nuances at play, and we have to look at each and every single section of our marriage quite, you know, in detail, and I suppose make it as best as it can be. I know, like, people are so busy these days, men, women alike, and I can talk for brothers, you know, they also feel bad, like, you know, when things are not, I suppose, a certain duration, because they want to be that, you know, I guess, person who can be proud of themselves. But ultimately, when it doesn't happen, they also feel like kind of crap.
Yeah, so I want to just talk about that a little bit, because I think something you were mentioning previously was the fact that, you know, in previous generations, they kind of just figured it out without much education. I mean, there was education. I have mentioned that women and men at the time of the Prophet ﷺ would speak to him and ask him questions about that topic. So they were seeking the education through asking the Prophet ﷺ. But one thing they didn't have, which is to their advantage, they didn't have the internet and social media, right? So they had each other to talk to. And so if they had struggles, they had their little kind of communities and villages. So like the younger women who were now getting married could hopefully ask the older women, like, you know, I'm going to be doing this act. Can you give me some advice? So they had their communities, but they didn't have the beliefs that we adopt from social media and the internet. And unfortunately, and movies and magazines, unfortunately, men and women for decades now have been exposed to, whether it's internet, magazines, movies, and then some other damaging sources of that type of, it's not even, I wouldn't call it education, but you know what I'm talking about. When it comes to learning about this topic, some people might access the damaging source of information. And so they then take those beliefs into their marriage and thinking they have to perform or thinking it needs to be done within a certain number of minutes. That was something that didn't exist at the time of the Prophet. They didn't have those pre-existing beliefs of having to perform, whereas now men and women are having to deal with those beliefs, and then they are criticizing themselves if they can't perform, or it's lowering their self-esteem. They might blame themselves, they might blame their spouse, they might think it's meant to be done a certain number of times per week. Again, it's because they're taking other people's beliefs and adopting it as though it's their own. Whereas really, this education might not be needed that much if we weren't being bombarded by what we see on social media. But the education is needed even more so now to kind of help people unlearn the damaging things that are being thrown at us through social media, etc. Unlearn what's not helpful and then learn what is helpful.
Well, no, you're so right, because we've got so many things that are, I guess, attacking us from different angles, and you look right, left, up, down. There's something that is distracting you, and that's something that are setting I suppose, the benchmark. And repetitive, I guess, repetition will make someone believe like, okay, that's how it's supposed to be. But if I benchmark myself against that, then I'm shit.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
It's quite for men as well. It's quite a stressful thing to go through. So on one of the podcasts on your website, you mentioned how your husband was very patient, and you praised him, and it sounded very, very good. Like, but you're no longer with your husband. Like, I don't want to be too nosy, but what happened? Why are you not together anymore?
So my husband and I got married when we were very young. We were 18. We met in sixth form. So we met at age 16. We got married in the summer right before university. We were both aged 18. And I'm 34 now. And I got divorced from my husband just several months ago. So it's still quite recent. And there were some issues within the marriage, which obviously I won't discuss. Someone recently asked me the question, like, they know the work I do, and they asked me, like, you're out here, Amirah, helping marriages, and it's amazing, helping people with their intimate struggles, and you're saving marriages. Why couldn't you save your own marriage?
Yeah, I've seen that comment somewhere.
And I'm not a marriage counselor. I'm not a marriage therapist. I'm sure there are marriage counselors and marriage therapists that have their own marriage issues. So it's kind of like saying, like, someone who's a doctor should never get ill. It's kind of like saying that. So alhamdulillah, in my own marriage, not to share any like private details, but in my own marriage, it ended not because of intimate issues. It ended because of, I would say, compatibility issues. And we were married for a long time, alhamdulillah. We have 2 kids in that marriage. The kids' father still sees them, but it was something that was amicable and agreed. He's a good man, mashallah, but it was just the 2 of us weren't compatible due to other issues in our marriage.
Hey guys, sorry to interrupt you in between, but I need to say this. Without the support of Alanya Turkish Fusion Restaurant on Roman Road, Tower Hamlets, this episode would not have been possible. If you are like me, who likes their food to taste delicious and also likes Turkish food at the same time, well, Alanya is your answer. They have incorporated South Asian authentic spices into Turkish food, and I kid you not, it tastes amazing. I've been there, I've tasted their food, and I will not recommend something to you that I haven't tasted for myself. So hit them up and go and check it out for yourself. If you have been enjoying today's episode of Side by Side, please do consider sharing with your family and friends, and of course, hit the subscribe button on the platform you are tuned into. It is your subscription that motivates us to keep edging forward episode after episode. Without any further ado, let's get straight back into the show. Talking of amicability, lot of and I have to say here, sorry sisters, they do use, I guess, if they are separating and if they are going their own way and if things are sour, they use, I guess, children as a leverage or as a tool of negotiation or power to get what they want, or at least try and get what they want. Islamically, I'm sure it's not fair or it's not just. What's your position? I mean, can you educate our sisters
Yeah.
on such topic.
Yeah. It's, in my opinion, it's extremely wrong for a woman to try and hold the kids hostage or use them as some kind of bargaining chip to get what they want. It's extremely wrong. It should not happen. I've seen in some marriages where the marriages end, the ex-wife doesn't allow the ex-husband to see his own kids. Again, extremely wrong. Unless there are valid reasons that were agreed by a court. For example, if he was extremely abusive or that kind of thing, that's different. But I mean, like, if the marriage ended because the man and the woman in that marriage weren't compatible, that doesn't mean that you stop your ex-husband from seeing your kids. I believe it's haram. It's not allowed. Like I said, unless there's genuine reasons agreed by the court. Like, those kids don't belong to you. They belong to Allah. Those kids came about because of the marriage. Those kids are, they are the children of your ex-husband as they are your own children as a woman. And so it's important to put aside any negativity you might feel towards your ex-husband and do what's in the best interest of your kids. And the majority of the time, what's in the best interest of the kids is still being able to have a father figure in their life, is still being able to have their father around to see regularly. So I believe it's extremely wrong. Like I said, there are certain extreme cases where the father needs to be removed.
Yeah.
Again, maybe abuse, things like that. But if that's not the case, then I think it's extremely wrong. And women, if any women are doing this, know that you will be held accountable in the akhirah.
So it's a sin to.
I'm not a scholar,
Mhm.
but I think, like I said, those kids don't actually belong to the woman. It's not like she created them.
Yeah.
They belong to Allah. And those kids came about because of a marriage. And so it's important that the kids still have their father in their life, because what I've seen, I have a girl and a boy. I know that both
Mashallah.
girls and boys require a father figure in their life. As long as he is, a good person in general, everyone has their faults. If he is a good person and he is able to take care of the kids when he does spend time with them, then that's all you need. Like, I think it's wrong for women to not
Quick
allow the
one
father
on
to
that subject. How did your family react when they realized mommy is like, go and talk to the world about a subject that is quite a taboo subject? Did they say, oh, what are my friends going to think? Or are they old enough to...
So my daughter's 11, my son is 8.
Okay. Are they aware of your...
My daughter's very aware of the work I
Okay.
do. My son, he knows that I have a business and I'm on social media. He knows that I help people in their marriages. He doesn't know the kind of intimate details
Okay.
of what I do, but he knows that I'm on social media.
And
That's what he knows.
how did my brother, your ex-husband, how did he react when you said, look, I want to take that as a profession and I want to educate others on that subject?
Yeah. So actually, okay, let me just say, a lot of people, I remember when I kind of announced that I'm no longer with my husband and that our marriage ended, a lot of people assumed it's, because she talks about intimacy so much and he wasn't happy about that. Actually, he was the reason that I started talking about it. He's the one who encouraged me. As mentioned, we were married for a long time, from age 18 and I'm now 34. So I started this work about 6 years ago. And he was the one that encouraged me that time, 6 years ago. He was like, you overcame this issue. I really think it would be great if you helped other women with the issue with vaginismus. He encouraged me to start this business and start my work and to put myself out there on social media, because social media is one great tool to bring in clients. And a lot of my clients are women with vaginismus. So alhamdulillah, and he knows this if he listens to this, he knows that he was the one who encouraged me to do this work. We did not separate because I'm doing this work. And even though we're separated and we're divorced now, I plan to continue this work because it goes back to what is my why behind why did I start this work? It's because I care about the Muslim community. I care about good, healthy, strong Muslim marriages. And just because I'm divorced doesn't mean I should stop helping my fellow Muslims.
I suppose it's like knowing how to drive, and that doesn't mean you can't crash a car. You can still crash a car while knowing how to drive. So
yeah.
Yeah.
And in terms of the question about my family, so like my parents are very supportive of the work I do. My kids are supportive of the work I do. I have siblings, so alhamdulillah, my family are very supportive.
I mean, generally, women are very supportive to each other. I mean, Do you get any abuse or attacks from the opposite genders? I'm sure you do, because your profile is, I was going to ask you, like, why don't you keep your profile private? Then that way, at least you know who you are engaging with. But your profile is open. So that's kind of exposed to anyone saying anything they want.
Yeah. I wanted the information I provide to be easy for anyone to access, because, as mentioned previously, one of the causes of the issues that we're seeing in the Muslim community, or the issues we're seeing in marriages, is because of how restricted this topic has been. So I didn't want to add any further restrictions. My YouTube channel, my Instagram, and my TikTok are open for anyone to access the information. I do offer private consultations and private courses for people who want more in-depth support. But in terms of the information that I want to give for free, I give it for free on social media, and it's not a private account. It's there for anyone to access, because and a lot of people have told me the work that what they've seen on my social media has really helped them. I've had messages from women saying that there were certain things they didn't know before marriage, and then they got married, and it really helped them to know that before marriage. So I don't want to put a barrier behind, like, in front of them in order to get the information.
Do you think vaginismus is that peaking more as we are progressing in years, say 24, 25, 26, whatever? Do you think the need is more now than before? Or is it because it's always been there, and because social media wasn't there, it wasn't spoken about, so we assumed it didn't exist? Just like mental health issues, it's spoken about more because, I guess, as you said, there's so many things are coming at us and we need to unlearn certain things. Do you think there's more need now than before, or it's just always been there and we just didn't know about it?
I think it's always been there. I would say it's probably been there since, I wouldn't say since the start of humanity, but I think it's existed throughout, as in throughout human history. I'm sure there have been cases of vaginismus, because when I broke it down later into what it actually involves, it is simple in its understanding of its muscles contracting, causing anatomically a woman's area down there to become narrower. What causes those muscles to contract? A lot of the time it can be fear, nerves. I'm sure within the creation of, like, human history, I'm sure there were women who felt nervous about their first time. Even prior to Islam, prior to Christianity, like all human history, I'm sure it existed, but it was just, obviously, I don't know when cases started being reported, but there are some studies that show, like, it's as common as 5% in women. I think it's higher than that. I think it's higher because there are some women who are just struggling in silence, or they figure out how to overcome it on their own, and so they don't mention it. But I wouldn't say it's more needed now. I would say, kind of like what you were saying before, it's just more talked about now. I have seen other podcasts, Muslim and non-Muslim podcasts, that talk about vaginismus, which is great, because spreading the awareness about not just vaginismus, anything that is something people don't know about, spreading awareness about it helps people to have knowledge about that issue in case they go through it, or in case they are going through it, so that they can overcome that struggle.
No, I appreciate the fact that Sister Fahima, one of our previous guests, has introduced us, and she said, like, that's a conversation that you should have, because it's not spoken about, and I suppose if it's seen as an education, then I don't see why we should have a problem in discussing such a subject, because when we go to doctors, we are open to talking about anything. And to me, in that sense, the way I look at you is like almost like a doctor in a specific field.
Yeah.
Because you specialize in this subject.
Yeah. Can I just say that for anyone who thinks that it's something not to talk about, or only talk about it in private, I just want to remind Muslims especially that we believe in how important marriages are. I believe in it myself. I am very fond of good, healthy, good quality marriages within the Muslim community, and I want that to grow. But what we're noticing is that there are many different causes for divorce, and we're noticing that divorce is becoming more common in the Muslim community. And sexual intimacy, or I would say struggles with intimacy, is a very common cause of divorce within Muslim marriages.
Is that what you see in your practice?
It's not just Muslim marriages, even non-Muslim marriages, one of the common causes. So it could be issues related to finance, or it could be other issues. But issues with intimacy is a big reason for divorce in marriages in general, Muslim or non-Muslim marriages. And so with that in mind, let's just focus on Muslim marriages for a moment. As a Muslim community, we believe that Muslim marriages that are healthy are important as a foundation for our ummah. And so if sexual intimacy is or struggles with intimacy are a cause for divorce, learning how to prevent those issues and learning how to educate about those issues to help that Muslim couple overcome those issues is going to, inshallah, strengthen that marriage, keep the couple together, as long as, inshallah, there are no other issues, keep the couples together in that healthy, strong marriage. So it's so important to think of it that way. And I mentioned previously, intimacy within marriage is a form of worship. So what does that mean when you break it down? With any form of worship, as long as it's your intention, you get rewarded by Allah. You're collecting those good deeds. It's something that is meant to be pleasurable and loving and fun for the couple to engage in. But because they are doing it in a halal way, they are getting rewarded as an act of worship. And it's also a form of charity. It's a form of sadaqah. So it kind of blows my mind that people say, oh, no, don't talk about it. Which Muslim is going to want to turn down more good deeds? Which Muslim is going to want to turn down the opportunity for sadaqah? Okay. Now, it doesn't mean because it's a good deed that you kind of try and manipulate your spouse into thinking, oh, like you kind of neglect their needs and just be like, satisfy my needs because it's a good deed. No, coming back to what's the foundation of marriage? Love, rahmah, compassion. That's important too.
I have a question in my mind, and I do think about it a lot. So if a couple is seeing each other before marriage, I guess shaitan is active. He wants them to do haram deeds.
Mm-hmm.
If those same couple, then they get married, do you think, I mean, with any marriages, I guess one of the biggest prizes of shaitan is if he breaks a marriage.
Mm-hmm.
I find it that shaitan is now trying to separate those same couple that he wanted them to do bad deeds. On one of your comments, and I did go through your social media quite a bit to see like if there is any interesting questions.
Mm-hmm.
Someone asked like, oh, or was it a comment where they said, if a wife refuses her husband of the act,
Mm-hmm.
then the angels are cursing the wife until the next morning or Fajr or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then you did address that comment. But my thing is, why was it said in the first place that the angels will curse?
So there is an organization called Karama that have studied this hadith, like the tafsir and the context of the hadith, why it was said. So I would recommend people just literally go onto Google and type Karama, angels cursing hadith. There is a free published paper by, I believe they're a group of Muslim lawyers in
Mm-hmm.
America who studied this hadith in its context. And basically to kind of summarize that paper that anyone can access, it's completely free. To summarize the main context behind the hadith of why it was said, there are some people who say it's a weak hadith. Let's say it's an authentic hadith and we're taking it at face value. At face value, it's not in alignment with what I mentioned previously in terms of compassion and mercy and understanding as the foundation of marriage. Because what we're noticing is there are some men who try to use that hadith kind of to their advantage to kind of manipulate their spouse and say, if you don't do this act with me, the angels are going to curse you. And then she might resent him and just, she might just do the act because she doesn't want to be cursed by angels. But that resentment is not going to foster what the purpose of marriage is, which is mercy, compassion, rahmah, all those kinds of things. So looking at the context of the hadith, it's believed that the angels would curse a woman if she refuses intimacy in a way where she is trying to manipulate her husband, or she's kind of weaponizing intimacy and saying, no, I'm not going to give intimacy to you because, I hate you, or whatever the case may be. Like she's using it to oppress him, manipulate him. Then that's when the context of the hadith applies. Now, what I've seen is in the majority of cases, women don't refuse intimacy to oppress their husband unless they happen to be a kind of a narcissistic woman or a woman who is, malicious in her intent. in terms of the cases I've worked with, that's very, very rare. I've not seen women refuse intimacy for those reasons. In the cases that I've seen, the reasons behind why a woman would refuse intimacy varies, and there are so many reasons. It could be she's tired, she's exhausted. It could be she's working all day and then she's coming home being with the kids, and he's just working, but he's not with the kids. And then he's fine because he's just done his work, but then he's not tired. She's tired for different reasons. Could be hormonal issues, could be health issues, exhaustion just from being so busy with the kids. It could be, and this is what I've seen a lot, just a simple case of a lack of emotional connection in the marriage, which didn't just happen in one day, happened over time. So over weeks and months and maybe even years, there was just a lack of the couple connecting emotionally. Maybe prior to kids, they had lots of date nights, they would go out, which is good, great. But then as soon as the kids came, they spent less time with each other. So they became more distant. And maybe for men, they're okay with that. They maybe don't need the emotional connection as much. But as mentioned before, Allah created women differently. I've seen that women tend to need that emotional connection more. And so if there's a lack of emotional connection in that marriage, the woman is going to potentially feel less desire for her husband. And sometimes the woman will communicate and will say things like, I want to spend more time with you. But if the man just brushes it to the side and just ignores that, doesn't acknowledge it, and just thinks, I want my needs met, she's going to feel like neglected. She's not going to feel valued. And that tends to be, so lack of emotional connection tends to be a really big reason for why a woman is not going to be in the mood for intimacy.
So, so with men, obviously, we all know biologically they are like kind of ready to go at any given moment, unless they are super, super, super tired.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, with sisters, as you said, they're built differently. The whole, I guess, the structure is same, but the build is different. And then they've got the monthly timing issues, so they are unavailable for, I guess, 8 days or 9 days or whatever days in some cases. And the guy is, while bearing in mind the guy is still active.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when he does come for his needs to be met, do you think, I mean, I've heard a lot like where sisters do refuse more frequently maybe than before.
Mm-hmm.
As you mentioned, kids, stress, work, so many different duties to attend to. But could shaitan also be at a place saying, you know what, like, you know, I'm gonna make a mess of the situation. I'm not gonna allow the wife to give the husband what he needs. And then ultimately he will go to those websites and, you know, if he's not God-fearing, of course, he will, you know, have a different outlet.
Yeah.
And in that situation, is it not better than, I guess, for sisters to just, I guess, bite the tongue and just, you know, attend to the needs, because you are avoiding a whole suite of problems that may arise just from refusal of the act.
Yeah, I love that question. It's a really good question. So in terms of could it be shaitan? Absolutely. It could be shaitan wanting to destroy that marriage. And so it's important that as Muslims, we're doing whatever we can to fortify ourselves spiritually against shaitan and to keep ourselves in check in terms of like, could this potentially be shaitan trying to destroy my marriage? Yes, there are cases where a woman might be like, you know, I'm not in the mood, but I'm just going to do it because I want to satisfy him. And if she's happy to do that, that's great. If it's not going to lead her to, you know, start feeling resentful towards her husband, if she's like, you know, I love my husband and I care about him and he has these needs, and even though I'm not really in the mood, maybe if I start, I might become in the mood. That's great. And she's happy to satisfy him that way. That is great. And I recommend that because I am someone who believes in mutual satisfaction for the man and the woman. I'm not here to just say only a woman's rights need to be met or a woman's needs to be met and forget about the man or vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not here to say that. I believe that in a marriage, it's made up of a man and a woman, and both of their needs are important and are valid and need to be acknowledged. And the man and the woman need to do the best they can to satisfy each other's needs. So with that being said, if a woman's happy to satisfy her husband in that way, then great. But men also need to take it upon themselves to think, okay, has my wife been communicating with me, or have I noticed changes in my wife where maybe she is a bit distant from me? What is the reason? So be a bit inquisitive. And her needs may not be physical, but they tend to be mental and emotional.
Yeah.
And some men maybe because of the way they were raised, or kind of like a sort of toxic masculine mindset of like, emotional needs don't really matter, whatever they might be thinking. Some men need to find a way to overcome that barrier and bring themselves into a middle ground where they're like, okay, even though it's uncomfortable for me as a man to be there for my wife emotionally because it maybe wasn't modeled to them growing up, or whatever the case may be, even though I know for a lot of men, they struggle with that emotional vulnerability. They tend to run away from it.
Yeah.
But I say run towards that, because the more you can foster emotional connection with your wife, the more your physical needs as a man, your intimate needs as a man, are more likely to be met. Because when the wife feels nurtured and well cared for emotionally and can see that her husband is providing emotionally, she's going to be 99% of the time in the mood, whether in the mood, like in terms of intimacy, or more willing to provide those needs for the husband.
So just talking on the same point, intimacy itself, like I see it's like it's a tool to also just keep things on track. So men think differently. Men are very, very different. They can be on the go and they can do the act and then they will be on their way again. But I guess with the sisters, that's not the case. So there's obviously one element, there's an emotional requirement and, build up and, having a nice time and, all of that. But there's also a I guess, risk mitigation strategy as well, I think, for sisters and brothers. I guess some women are more active as well in some marriages than the man himself. So it's vice versa. But I think, like, should there not be also a risk mitigation plan or check in place just to make sure that my husband, when he's going out, facing or seeing all the things that come their way, maybe they don't even want to see it. Maybe it's on their face. How do you ring fence them against all these distractions? And I think, like, that risk mitigation plan, or, having more frequent or whenever he wants, intimacy, delivering that, I think it will definitely ring fence the brother from thinking otherwise. Because ultimately, if he's refused, or for right reason, wrong reason, whatever reason, he will ultimately, his mind will wander off somewhere else.
Yeah. So I don't know whether I would frame it as risk mitigation, because if a woman starts to think that way and starts to think, oh, I'm just going to have intimacy with my husband to prevent him from cheating, or prevent him from looking at things he shouldn't be looking at, or prevent him from doing things outside the home that he shouldn't be doing, that's going to probably affect her self-esteem, and that's going to probably make things worse in the marriage. And actually, those beliefs that she has, where she's constantly worried about her husband, are going to make her feel insecure. And then she will project that in the marriage, project that onto her husband. And that's probably going to make him run a million miles away. And it's going to make things worse in the marriage. So I don't want to frame it as risk mitigation, because he's responsible for his actions. So even if she's refusing intimacy all the time, there is a solution to that, whether it be working together to find out why is she refusing intimacy and trying to overcome that solution, or separate and divorce if she doesn't want, if she keeps refusing it. There's divorce is halal. Like, after trying to resolve it, if there's no resolving, divorce, and then go and marry someone else and do it in the halal way. So the man is responsible for his actions, even if the woman is doing wrong. It doesn't give him the permission to go do wrong. He's responsible for his actions, as is the woman. If she's doing the wrong, she will be held accountable on her own in front of Allah for her wrongdoing. He will equally be accountable for his wrongdoing. He can't blame the woman, and vice versa. The woman can't blame the husband. She needs to take responsibility for her actions. He needs to take responsibility for his actions. I don't think a woman should just be like, oh, I'm going to keep saying yes to intimacy just because I want to risk mitigate and prevent him from doing it. But what I do think is for women and men to reframe how they view intimacy, but also broaden their concept of intimacy, because I mentioned previously, most people see intimacy as one type. Intimacy is so much broader than that. There's things before the actual intimate act, but also when it comes to that act that most people think of, that's not the only form of intimacy. There are so many other ways that men and women can be satisfied within a marriage. Even if that specific act doesn't happen that most people think of, there are other ways. And I will leave you to use your imaginations if necessary, but it's not that difficult when you think about it. When you think of organs that Allah created, the sexual organs that Allah created, that are the organs that are stimulated in that act, that one type of act that most people think of isn't the only way for those organs to be stimulated in a healthy halal way within marriage. And why am I saying that is because sometimes it could be, for example, in vaginismus, where that specific act is difficult and painful, or it could just be sometimes when a woman at certain points within her cycle, even if she's not on her period, certain months within her cycle, she might have less energy or she might be really tired. So she feels like it takes too much energy to work herself up for that one specific act, but she's happy to do it in other ways to satisfy him. Think of broadening your perspective of intimacy and see intimacy as one tool in marriage to bring you closer and to strengthen the marriage. Because when the marriage is strong, the husband, no matter what he's facing outside the home, or the wife herself, if she's outside the home, no matter what they're facing outside the home, they are happy and content in their marriage, that they're not going to be distracted or tempted by what they see outside the marriage.
No, absolutely. Everyone is responsible for their own actions, for sure. So in that case, instead of divorce, can a wife not even propose to her husband, look, get married again to someone else? Like, I'll stay here as well, but because I know I can't fulfill, I guess, your requirement as frequently as you require, could the option not be that then marry someone else as well?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. If a woman is really, truly happy with that as an option for her husband, for her to be a co-wife, for her husband to get a second wife, and she knows within herself that maybe she'll feel a little bit sad inside, but overall, in terms of her mental health, emotional health, spiritual health, and physical health, if it's something she doesn't feel will impact her too much and she's content with that decision, that is fine. I know for the majority of women in general, they're not really happy with that as a decision. But I actually want to come to say, if a woman knows that she really struggles to meet her husband's sexual needs, it could be that they try and figure out a solution, a compromise together. Or it could be that she has to decide that either I separate and divorce from my husband, let him marry someone else, or she wants to remain married to him. She can't fully satisfy his needs. And so she needs to understand that if he does have a really high desire, and he's always wanting to be intimate, but she can't satisfy that to that degree, but she loves her husband and wants to stay married to him, she needs to come to an acceptance of probably the only solution is for him to get a second wife. So it is a challenging situation, but she needs to be real with herself. Sometimes, in this dunya, we can't have everything the way we want. That's the nature of this dunya. It's not perfect, but it will require a lot of introspection for the woman to really make that decision. She might need to seek professional help, whether it's from a scholar or from someone who's qualified in that area when it comes to marriage, for her to really ask, like, which of the options in front of me is the best option? Is it divorce or is it being a co-wife? Like, really figuring it out. But prior to that is sometimes it requires looking at the woman, looking at herself in terms of understanding herself, because desire for intimacy is something that Allah put in women too. Women also have desire for intimacy. Some people think it's not as high as men. Actually, there are a lot of women who do have a very high desire for intimacy, either the same or sometimes more than the man. So desire for intimacy is something within women, but it's something that seems to have been suppressed over time, probably due to the way that woman was raised when she was a girl or a teenager. It might be kind of shaming thoughts about her body, shaming thoughts about intimacy itself, thoughts such as, she might have been told, intimacy is something for the man only. It's not really something for the woman. Like, a woman's needs don't matter. So because of that, it might require her working with a professional. There are specialists such as myself or marriage therapists, marriage counselors that can help a woman learn how to figure out how to build desire. Because when she learns that, then she could be the one sole way that he satisfies his needs. But it requires there are some nuances within that situation.
I mean, there's so many things that plays in there within a marriage, and yeah, it's a very complex subject and very complex matter. And I always say, it's not something that you can just talk about over in a 1 hour discussion and have answers to those challenges. Now, moving away from the subject of intimacy, and And this is something I think not just in this country. I mean, it's normal in this country. And then I will have another follow-up question to this one relating to intimacy, because I just remembered now. But you know, when sisters are giving birth, delivery, in my country where I come from, in Bangladesh, you know, is something like men should not, I guess, witness. You know, it's a sister's thing. They deal with it internally, and you know, they get it done. And that's probably why you have so many children in each families in those countries, because the man doesn't really get to see the trauma and the pain. But in this part of the world, a man is frowned upon if he doesn't go in to the delivery theater with his wife, as if he doesn't love her or something.
Yeah.
Like, I remember when I went in, I ended up crying. I'm like, the doctor's like, can someone take this guy out of this room, because he's just making matters worse. But we men, we remember everything. But maybe Allah has given the sisters some strength to forget after a while. Do you think we should really rethink this situation, and, you know, maybe let sisters deal with that situation, as opposed to forcing a husband and maybe even blackmailing him to witness something that is very difficult to witness? It's not that, I guess, men don't love their wife. Obviously, it increases their love for sure, because if they see what's happening, but it also affects them mentally. Like, you know, maybe I don't want to have any more kids, maybe because I don't want to put my wife through this.
Yeah. I think it's very dependent on the couple themselves. It's something that they need to discuss with compromise, give and take in terms of what decision they decide together. I don't think it's bad for the man to be outside the room if the couple have decided that together. And equally, you know, if the man really doesn't want to be in the room, but the wife really wants him there, and the man kind of sacrifices his own mental health for a moment and is okay with that, because he wants to do it for the wife, because he loves her and cares about her, even though he knows he'll really struggle, it's something that she really wants and he's going to do that for her, then that's great. So I don't think there's a necessary right or wrong in the situation. What might be wrong is if, you know, they kind of just don't take each other's needs into account. The woman can be considerate of the man's needs in that time, as can the man be considerate of the woman's needs in that time. I think who kind of gets the final say in that situation, I think it should be the woman, because she's going through a very difficult situation. So what I mean by that is, if no matter what, she really wants her husband there, and, you know, that's the be all and end all, then just as a man, kind of man up and just do it, even if it's really difficult. But if she's the type of woman, because every woman's different, if she's the type of woman who's like, you know what, I'd actually prefer my husband to be out there, I don't want him to see me in that way, or whatever the case may be, and she's happy with him to not be in the room, but they've decided as a couple, that's all that matters. It's dependent on the couple. They need to communicate.
But it's lifelong trauma, because, you know, I vividly remember everything that I've seen, but my wife doesn't. So maybe sisters can advise each other. Look, it's a good idea for him not to go.
It's for the man to reframe his thoughts about it. Instead of him thinking this is lifelong trauma, see it as this is an experience that Allah created as a blessing. And yes, there was pain involved and there was difficulty involved, but every human in existence has gone through pain, has, man or woman, boy or girl, experiences pain, experiences difficulty. You know, noble people from the past, righteous people, prophets have experienced pain and difficulty. So it's something we go through. And instead of seeing it as lifelong trauma, see it as an experience that was challenging for me, but it helped me to grow closer to my wife, helped me to really understand the difficult process of it. Like, you know, it's just reframing the mindset around it might be helpful.
Can the same principle then be applied when it comes to intimacy? Like, where the sister said, you know what? It's not about me or him. It's about Allah. And should we now think about, you know, what would really please Allah? And to my mind, what's pleasing to Allah is to see a family grow, and, you know, that a family that stays together. Because ultimately, if they separate, then I guess shaitan has won. And obviously, there's so many different challenges a marriage can face. But can that same principle not be applied? Like, women up, and, you know what, just get on with it.
Definitely. So, no, I do think that it isn't. I've mentioned that I care about men being satisfied in the marriage and the women being satisfied in the marriage. But marriage is two people, right? So there has to be room for compromise, room for give and take. Okay. And so if the woman, as I mentioned before, if she's happy to, even if she's not in the mood for it, but she wants to satisfy him, even if she's not in the mood and she doesn't, and it's not going to cause future resentment, good on her. I encourage that to strengthen the marriage. But if she notices she's the one constantly sacrificing her needs, constantly putting in the effort, and then she communicates her own needs to the husband, it could be emotional needs, it could be anything. It could be like, I really want to spend more time together, or I really want to do this. But she notices that the husband doesn't acknowledge her needs,
Yeah.
then that's an issue because she's the one constantly, so there
Understood.
has to be the give and take. That's why I was saying men need to sometimes think,
Yeah.
okay, how can I do something for my wife, even though I don't really want to, or I'm
Mhm.
comfortable? There has to be that give and take. That's important in any marriage, definitely.
Men are dogs. What are your thoughts? Or if a man has a high drive,
Mhm.
he's somehow looked down upon, like, what's wrong with you? I mean, your position on this.
Mhm. So men and women have desire for intimacy. It's something that I believe Allah created within men and women. So it's not just men. I feel like with men, usually how they were raised is like with this mindset of like men have a high desire, or men's needs are more important, that kind of thing. And then women are raised with the opposite mindset. And so that's why we kind of see, it seems like men have a higher desire and women don't. But I think that it's either equal or it might be slightly less in women, but it tends to be variable in women. So it could be certain times, and this is actually scientifically proven. Women have a monthly cycle. They'll have a few days where they have their period, but then other times in their cycle, like for example, in the part of their cycle where they are ovulating, which happens every month for women who have a regular period, the ovulatory period tends to be a period of time where women have a higher desire for intimacy. So it's variable in women. So I forgot what my main point was, but I don't. Oh, so men are not dogs. They simply, maybe because of the way they were raised or programmed, have an easier way of saying to their wife, I want to be intimate. Whereas women might have a bit more shyness within them, or it's just been suppressed, or they see intimacy as something shameful, or whatever the case may be. So they don't communicate it as much. But I have noticed, because some of the messages and comments I receive are the opposite situation to what you were mentioning, where the woman has a higher desire and the man doesn't crave intimacy that much, and the woman wants it more, and that's a problem in marriage too. So what's important is to understand that desire for intimacy can be higher or lower and is affected by different things in men and women. So what's important is in a marriage, regardless of whether it's the man or woman, if one spouse has a higher desire for intimacy, it requires them to come together as a team to figure out how can the spouse with a lower level of desire figure out what she or he needs to make their desire higher so that they can satisfy each other. Okay. And as I mentioned before, like broadening your view and concept of intimacy, because there are different ways to satisfy each other.
Thank you. That's very, very interesting. Now, men generally, I mean, I guess that's just a repeat. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna mention it. I'm gonna move on to the, because I was gonna say something, and I guess it's just gonna be a repeat of the same question. What's future looking like for you in terms of your business? I mean, let's talk a little bit about business before we finish. How is it going?
It's going really well, alhamdulillah. All of the work I do is online. So the courses I deliver, the coaching, the consultations is all done online, which works really well in terms of my lifestyle, but also in terms of the people that I can help. I help people from all over the world. So it's been really nice to see that I'm able to help people regardless of their background or regardless of where they live in the world. So alhamdulillah, it's doing really well. And I think part of the reason it's doing well, alhamdulillah, is because I'm one of the few Muslim educators in this topic. And I offer very sort of specific niche courses that isn't offered that much elsewhere. So people kind of see me as one of the main go-to educators with regards to if they have struggles in this, in this part of their life, they can come to me and get my help. So alhamdulillah, it's been very good for the
I'm
business.
sure you have had many success stories. What's the success rate? Is it quite high or 50-50 or what it's like?
Yeah, so for vaginismus cases where a woman's struggling with pain with regards to intimacy, alhamdulillah, success rate is really good, depending on the type of support they receive from me. So with my private coaching, success rates are very, very high because it's a bit more personalized and more, there's a higher level of support because they're getting direct coaching from me. With regards to women who join my course, I have a specific course to help with vaginismus. The success rate varies, and it's because the course is delivered in a self-paced way. So they watch video lessons and they're not getting direct coaching from me. So it depends on the level of efforts the woman is putting in with regards to watching the video lessons and applying the video lessons, holding herself accountable, which is why I always recommend if a person or if a couple are able to invest in the private coaching, they're more likely to see the success versus kind of the course will give you the success because it's the same things I teach in the coaching, but it doesn't have that level of accountability. So if someone is good at holding themselves accountable, doing the course, and they have a really strong why behind doing the course and applying it, then they're going to be successful. Meaning they have a strong why. It tends to be things like a woman is like, I really want to get pregnant. And if they're struggling with intimacy, it's going to be challenging to get pregnant. So that tends to be quite a strong why behind a lot of women finishing the course and seeing success, whereas others may not have a very strong why, and so they might kind of dabble in the course or kind of do the course a bit and then take a break, and so they may not see the success. So the success is dependent on the effort that is put in, definitely.
Amazing. Let's end with a quick fire to get you know a little bit better so our audience can understand who Sister Amirah is, aside from her line of work. Now, let's begin with your greatest fear, apart from akhirah, in this dunya.
Something happening to my kids, something bad happening to them.
Okay. iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
Good. What's your favorite dish?
I would say Thai sticky rice with barbecue chicken. My mum is from Thailand.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. My dad is from Egypt, but Thai food and definitely Thai sticky rice with.
So sticky
chicken.
rice, I love sticky rice as well. It's like, is it the really, really sticky ones or slightly sticky?
You eat it with your hands, and there's a salad that I usually have it with called somtam salad with the chicken, with the sticky rice. That's my go-to.
Amazing. I love sticky rice. In my village, in where I come from, it's like they put it in a bamboo, the rice with the banana leaves.
Yeah.
And then it gives this really nice fragrance and aroma, and then they put it on fire, and then it cooks within the bamboo, and then they become like what you call it, sushi, like in circular, and then you take the leaf off and you have it with tea.
Nice.
Or you can have it with fried fish or something. But it's really nice. It's really nice. That's the first time I'm hearing someone say sticky rice. That's amazing. What's the best piece of advice have you ever received in your life?
I need time to think of that because I've just received so many good pieces of advice that I apply. Okay, one recently that I've started doing actually a lot is saying astaghfirullah regularly to see changes in your life. Like something that not a lot of people will think of. Like we're taught, seek forgiveness from Allah, but we see it from the lens of we seek forgiveness from Allah to kind of erase our sins, and that's a part of it. But I'm doing it for two reasons: to seek forgiveness from Allah to erase my sins, but the other main reason is because it helps you relieve so many things in your life. So any difficulties you're going through in your life, stress, anxiety, if you're struggling financially, if you're struggling with your health, if you want more openings and abundance in your life, just so many things. That's another benefit of saying astaghfirullah regularly. And it's advice I've heard quite a lot recently on social media for that benefit. So I would say just make astaghfirullah your default. Like when you have downtime and you're not doing anything, and just like today when I was on the train, I would just be like, oh, I have nothing to do, I'm a bit bored. Just default is, oh, astaghfirullah. That's what I would say.
It's so amazing you say this because you said it really relieves you from stress.
Yes.
Recently, like, just 2 days ago, I was in gym and I was like, pushing this, thing, heavy thing. And I was like, my heart was going like so fast. And then I read something like astaghfirullah, something like this, and immediately my heart slowed down. I don't know, like, if this is just a coincidence, or is it because I read something, or Allah's words or something, but it really calmed down straight away, and I was like, whoa, this is shocking.
Yeah, it's something most people won't think of. They will see it as, oh, there's only one reason why I should say astaghfirullah, which is to ask for Allah's forgiveness. And that is one of the reasons. So do it with that intention. But the added intention is, for a lot of people struggle with anxiety and mental health. If it's mental health, obviously seek professional treatment too, but simple spiritual things we could do, such as saying astaghfirullah, can just help calm our nervous system a bit.
100%. Quran is so powerful. Now, I've witnessed things in my life, I've been fortunate enough to witness, for example, ruqya sessions. I've witnessed it firsthand, and I was like, wow, like, this is Quran. And like, as soon as you start reading Quran, and it has this effect on a being,
energy. It changes
this
energy,
is absolutely like fascinating. And that, gave me so much more conviction and belief in Quran. Because sometimes, when you're going about your life and you ask, like, is this real? Is this supposed to be? But I guess witnessing those things, it just reaffirms your faith that Quran is the true message and true words of Allah. What's the last one? What's the most used app on your phone?
I'm ashamed to say Instagram. I would say probably even more so over the past year with what we're witnessing in the world. Just it's either me wanting to see what's happening, or it's me responding to business inquiries, messages, me posting content. So I don't like that. That is my answer, but it's the truth. That's my answer.
Sister Amirah Zaky, thank you so much for joining us. And it's been a wonderful discussion. And I hope our brothers, I say brothers because a lot of brothers do watch this podcast, I hope they will see this episode as an educational episode rather than, a taboo episode. And, we're just talking about random things. It's not random. And I think whatever you've pointed out is very important. And I think there's a real problem. Like, I may not witness it, he may not witness it, but there are those people that do. Like, just like fear of flying, there's those people who are so afraid, and you'd think, why? But it does exist. So I guess for those people who have those unique circumstances, and I'm sure they will find it beneficial. And for those who don't find it beneficial, just ride along and bear with us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's it for today on Side by Side with myself, Kazi Shafiqur Rahman, as your host, and our guest, Sister Amirah Zaky, who is an intimacy therapy expert. If you have been enjoying our contents on Side by Side so far and also have enjoyed today's episode, please do consider subscribing to the channel on the platform you are tuned into, and also share it with your friends and family. With that said, I will see you on our next episode. Assalamu alaikum.